Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, boys and girls. How are we all doing today? As promised yesterday, today we are starting with the continued reading, or rather the restarted reading, of the English Constitution as written by Walter Bagehot and obviously updated by Bagehot as life continued in Victorian Britain. I will be commenting on it. Before we start, I guess we should have done this yesterday. It's too late now, but I was going to say, let's have a vote on whether I should read it all out loud again, or whether we can just go through until whichever page it was in that we were last. Yeah? Okay, let's have a vote in 5 seconds. You can start. Our administrator has set it up. Thank you. Well, the reason why I started with the English Constitution as opposed to Lombard Street is not that Lombard Street is somehow less relevant. In fact, I think Lombard Street is just as relevant as the English Constitution. And that really speaks a lot to the nature of humanity, the nature of society, and how none of it has changed, right? So, the reason why I started with the English Constitution, though, is because I think there are some fundamental lessons here that we should learn before the second half of the year begins. Now, some of you will know that I have been a big proponent of the fact that we haven't seen the bottom of the cycle yet. In fact, I basically ranted about it on air yesterday. And part of the problem there is obviously that recessions tend to bring about extremism. And so I wanted to start with the English Constitution because I wanted to get there as the second half of the year came around, so that we can, how do I say? So I can hopefully help moderate some of the thoughts that might, passively diffuse into your minds from the rest of society. Because obviously, like, you lot and I, we have different information sources, right? Like, mine are predominantly, if not neutral, then at least, how do I say? My news is mostly from the markets, from how the markets behave, from the way that central banks behave. My news are mostly sort of on the macro scale, right? So I see trends in society, whereas a lot of you see trends in individual events. And so, sort of by definition, those individual, the staccato of individual events is going to be different than the slightly smoother, to use a second mildly pretentious word, and to continue with our music analogy, the legato, the way that markets tell me news about society is smoothed out. It smoothes out a lot of the a lot of the pinpoint op-eds, pinpoint, partisan point scoring, and that helps me sort of be less, shall we say, angry all the time. Muses gets his news from more from reputable money-based sources, i.e. sources that aim to help investors and nobody messes with money, right? Let's be very clear on that. The polls are, you're totaling it up, right? Fantastic. Okay. Compared to getting news sources from more quote staccato sources, which are more likely to radicalize and stimulate in the moment. And so when you when I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. When someone is stimulated with these staccato news sources, it tends to be a wild, I don't want to say wild, this tends to be an emotional response, whereas market-based news is much more a reasoned, or let's not say reason, let's say philosophical response. And we'll get to why it's philosophical in the near future. I am playing around with this pretentious, all great philosophers struggle with this pretentiousness that is the duality of man, and obviously I have also my own interpretations on this. So yeah, we will. Yes, you can see there exactly, right? The year 1 class 2 and year 1 class 1 students have already made their opinion on, or have already expressed that I should continue talking about this. And I should note that this is a super pretentious and super philosophical, and my interpretation of this is going to be very different compared to perhaps what everyone's used to. Anyway, the votes are in. I get to just read quietly and comment until we get to whatever part of the English Constitution that we actually read to in the past. So what this means is you'll probably hear, moments of silence as I read. Excuse me. Well, it's not going to be silence because obviously the background music is playing, right? Is the background music too loud? Yeah? Okay, I'll drop it down by another 4 decibels. Okay. So that's another 4 decibels down, and so this should be fine. Without further ado then, let's start. I don't know how many of you will be able to keep up with my reading. It's fine if you can't. If you want me to go back and discuss something that I seem to have skipped, that's perfectly reasonable as well. Just note it down. Sounds good? Good. I'm starting all the way up here, by the way. Yeah. And just another note. Sometimes I will like highlight, but that's not because I actually want to highlight, but that's just for me to keep track of where in the line I'm reading. In part, what mildly annoys me about this is that I can't. Oh, I suppose I could. Oh. We'll get rid of set list 2. There we go. Yeah. Hold on. Where's my mouse? There it is. Yeah, actually, I will do this. We'll do that. You get to see the set list in the background, but you know what? That's fine. We'll do this, and then we'll do. Yes, there is another version of the window in the background. Okay. Or actually, in this case, then we should probably do set list 2 as opposed to set list 1. There we go. Okay. Well, I'm gonna get started. I don't know about you lot, okay? We have 20 minutes. Great. in a balanced union of three powers, right? um Actually, I can comment on that. Okay, so but just having just before we continue, right? Like Bagehot is not saying that this is good. Bagehot is saying that Bagehot is saying that check is Bagehot is not saying that check and balances are bad, rather saying that the system did not arise out of a innate virtue of the limited power of the king of the monarch, right? I think that's all he's saying here. Dignified and efficient, right? Remember, the how do we say the appearance of the government, and efficient being the function of the government. Does this work? Does this work? Excellent, that works. Okay. We'll reject the dignified parts to do business. This is, of course, no longer true, right? Like the average British citizen claims themselves to be a citizen of his. I keep trying to say Her Majesty, but obviously that's not true. His Majesty Charles III. Probably less so now that it's Charles III, but that's a whole other issue. There's nothing dignified about being a tampon, right? Like, oh my god, Charles. Oh my god. I need to add this in just to demonstrate my contempt for it. Muses, there's nothing dignified about being a tampon. No, that's not okay. About let's add in human tampon, right? So for those of you who don't know, Charles, in one of his many letters to Camilla, has claimed that he would that was it in the next life? I can't remember. Has claimed that he wanted to be one of her tampons. Yes. It's just, yeah, there's nothing dignified about that, no. But I was going to say, the this is no longer true, right? The motive power is Bagehot would claim that Her Majesty Queen Victoria was a source of legitimacy for the government, i.e., the government exists because it is Her Majesty's government, whereas without the blessing of Queen Victoria, it isn't a legitimate government, and that is obviously untrue, right? Like we essentially how do I say this? Even the most uneducated person today, you know, when they look at the monarchy, they understand instinctively that they are no longer ruled, quote unquote, ruled by Queen Victoria. They know very well that they live in a democracy that espouses one person, one vote, and they see that their vote has not brought them, or quite oftentimes they see that their vote has not brought them any sort of benefits, and so there is that. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. So they see that there is that, or rather, we see that there is that move towards apathy, towards lower voter turnout, simply because people have stopped believing that their votes count. Right. So today, or let's not say today, last year, let's say in 2021, right? What is the power of the monarchy? Actually, 2019, what is the power of the monarchy? The power of the monarchy comes from it being able to symbolize the unit. Do you really need me to use the Z? The unity of a country. I have talked about this a little bit when we celebrated her life after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. But it remains very much true now, and that is the dignity. Let's borrow a word from Bagehot. The dignity of the monarchy allowed the UK to shed its empire with a certain amount of grace, right? That's not to say there weren't problems. Obviously, there were problems within the UK for the past 60 years. But at every turn, whenever, you know, another geopolitical crisis arose and the UK was not able to deal with it in the same way as it did in the Victorian era, the Queen was there as a symbol of unity, as a symbol of empire, as a symbol of strength, and that allowed the country to sort of deal with that in a way that it didn't kill themselves, if that makes sense, right? E.g. during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Queen's broadcasts were very healing, quote unquote, let's say quote unquote healing, to the British public. Right, I think, or at least the exactly the I feel it was healing. The people that I talked to feel it was healing. So it was generally a net benefit to have the Queen be able to be the great unifier during a time of political turmoil, right? So let me actually add that in as well. The Queen was able to become a unifier while political turmoil raged around her, right? Like, she was a source of stability, as partisanship overloaded the House of Commons, i.e., Jeremy making the lives of May and Hammond difficult. And this is obviously an inside joke because Theresa May and Philip Hammond and Jeremy Corbyn, or Jeremy versus what's his face, Bojo, right? So like these were very much like difficult political moments, but the Queen was there, and she was, the simple fact that she was there meant that it was difficult. So like okay, let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. But should we talk about it here? No, let's talk about it in a response to this. Compare that to the US, where thoughts, and this is not just in the recent past, of course, right? Like we've seen this happen 50 years ago, where thoughts of secession, is that how you spell secession? No, that's how you spell secession. Arise often when extremely partisan issues arise, right? If we want, like one of our near examples, you could say like, what is her name, Marjorie, whatever, Taylor Greene, right? And sort of like, and the country self-selecting, arise, and the country self-selects into areas of pro, against, for, against. Oh no, I clicked the wrong button, and so I lost that, did I? Oh yeah, I did. Okay, compare this to the US, where hyper-partisan issues often lead to talk of secession because the population I was gonna say self isolate, but I should also say self radicalizes, lies, due to the fact that there is no unifying symbol that everyone can agree to, right? And the obviously the eagle doesn't count, the American dollar doesn't count, definitely not the Fed. Definitely not the FOMC. There is really nothing that would that two partisan groups in America can agree on. Like once they have gone through that hyperpartisan way, there's nothing that for them really to agree on, right? And to me, that is absolutely tragic, because like there should be things for you to agree on, but there unfortunately isn't. Like, to them there isn't, right? And that's tragic. What time are we at? We're at 24. So let's say it is important for citizens of a country to have some sort of kernel of universal truths to agree on, otherwise they descend into true partisans. I'll just leave it at that, because obviously, like, yes, exactly. That's one of the arguments, which is even though the Queen existed, the radicalized, I guess let's call them Brexit voters, were still a thing, and that's absolutely true. I'm not saying that having a monarch would be a panacea, but I think it did help the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. They sort of manage that decline, right? Did I leave this up here? Shed its empire with a certain amount of grace, yeah. So the symbol of the empire helped manage the decline of the empire. Graceful. Yeah, that, right? Like, well, now I'm just repeating myself. So let's continue for another 3 minutes. Which we live in is organized far otherwise, and that's because there is partisanship, and the people who are in government. Okay, that's because the people who are in government are not always there to do what is best for the country as a whole, but rather to do what is best for their own area and themselves. And strangely, actually, you kind of do want that, right? Because the whole idea of a democracy, of a representative democracy, is that there is someone that fights for local issues at the national scale. The problem, of course, becomes when these people are able to hold up issues that largely don't affect themselves and their constituents for power plays, right? So you do actually want this in a functional democracy because it helps protect local people and brings local problems to the national level and leverages the national resources to help solve local problems. The issue that arises is when local power players hold up national issues which may not affect themselves or their constituents, simply blah 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 for power plays. And you know, like that is, to me at least, that is the problem. We haven't gotten very far today, but that's in part because, you know, we had a vote at the start and then we had this long-winded discussion on, you know, dignity. And here I should point out we're looking at sort of the very it was a very Victorian thing to compare civilized nations to savages, right? Like anything that's not European or in some way American is considered pretty savage and pretty quote unquote uncivilized. Whereas, you know, like really the only difference between their civilizations and the European civilizations was that, you know, Europeans had better industry. That doesn't mean the other countries didn't have culture, right? I mean, obviously, I say this from the perspective of someone who has I say this from the perspective of of a culture that was essentially colonized, right? So yeah, we had our own culture. Hold on. Let's see. I'm gonna say this while pouting, but we had our own culture. Anyway, yeah. So we are done for today. I'm gonna do this. Continue here, and in essence, this means that I know it's the last annotation, right? So let's say I come back to this the next time we do this. Can I do this? Let's say we come back, yeah. So next time we start here. We can click on the last annotation and be like, yeah, just take us down to at the bottom right there, right? Like that. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much for watching. In conclusion, please download Firefox, please don't do Chrome, and I shall see all of you sometime this week, probably tomorrow. And yeah, no, we'll be fine. We got this. Okay. Well, regardless, bye now. Oh, right, wink. Let's do our right eye today, wink.